the normalization of relations between Israel and Turkey.
I'm sure this is an agreement that's good for both sides.
Сбили военный самолет, у нас люди погибли.
İlişkilerimizi süratle normalleştireceğimize inanıyorum.
Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Andrea Sankey. Turkey has turned over a new leaf in its relationships with Israel and Russia. President Erdogan has expressed sadness over shooting down a Russian jet on the Syrian border last year, and he is now expected to speak directly to President Putin. Now, this comes as Turkey and Israel have signed a deal normalizing their relations 6 years after Israeli troops killed 10 Turkish activists on an aid ship heading to Gaza. Now, Turkey was once one of Israel's closest allies in the Middle East, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the new agreement will help bring stability to the region. Our newsmaker today is Turkey, as we ask what's behind the rapprochement and the impact it could have on the region and the world.
Mavi Marmara, you are approaching an area of hostilities. The Gaza area, coastal region, and Gaza Harbor are closed to all maritime traffic.
They have jammed all the lines so no one is able to make any phone calls.
We are being attacked in international waters completely illegally.
The incident that severed Israeli-Turkish relations. Israeli commandos storming a ship, trying to take aid to Gaza. 9 Turkish activists and 1 Turkish American were killed. The raid was condemned around the world, and the once firm allies cut diplomatic ties.
It is not possible for an aggressive state that has openly conducted a massacre to face the international community without an expression of regret.
This wasn't a love boat. This was a hate boat. These weren't pacifists, they weren't peace activists. These were violent supporters of terrorism.
But now, after a 6-year rift, a reconciliation.
The process to normalise relations has started.
It has also immense implications for the Israeli economy.
Turkey and Israel have agreed to normalise ties and reinstate their ambassadors. The deal is also expected to improve economic ties, including cooperation on exploiting natural gas reserves. Israel apologised for Mavi Marmara back in 2013 and has agreed to pay $20 million to the victims' families and those injured. In return, the Israeli military and government officials will be immune from prosecution. Turkey will also be allowed to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza through the Israeli port of Ashdod and carry out reconstruction projects.
With this shipment, the embargo will be lifted under the leadership of Turkey.
But the blockade, which the activists died trying to break, remains in place.
זהו אינטרס ביטחוני עליון שלנו. אני לא הייתי מוכן להתפשר עליו. האינטרס הזה הוא חיוני למניעת התעצמות של החמאס, והוא נשאר והיה כפי שהוא.
One of Turkey's conditions for reconciliation had been the ending of the Gaza blockade. So for some in Gaza, this compromise goes too far. Even if Turkey has promised to continue to support Palestine's rights as it moves to strengthen ties with its old ally. With the war in Syria playing out on both of their doorsteps, it's clear that Turkey and Israel need each other. And as it becomes increasingly disillusioned with its Western neighbours, is Turkey now looking closer to home? Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
Joining me now to discuss Turkey and Israel's decision to normalize relations, from London, Dr. Alon Liel, former Director General at the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and here in our studio is former Turkish Ambassador to Israel, Dr. Oguz Celikkol. Thanks both so much for joining us. In a sense, this actually just marks a return to the status quo. But the question is, how much do Turkey and Israel need this normalization after 6 years of animosity and given where the region is today? Let me begin in the studio.
Well, I think it's a very good beginning. Israel and Turkey made a very good beginning, signing this agreement. It means the normalization of the relations. It means the upgrading of the diplomatic representation in Ankara and Tel Aviv. And it means, of course, high-level contacts will begin again, and the cooperations will begin again. Both countries will benefit from this deal, in my view, bilaterally, in bilateral relations. But also, of course, our region is passing through a very difficult time. There are a lot of uncertainties in the Middle East. There is civil war in two of our neighbors. Syria is a neighbor of Turkey and also a neighbor of Israel. What's happening in Syria probably a concern for Turkey and for Israel also. So bilaterally, it's a good beginning because now we can increase our economic cooperation.
Okay.
Fortunately, of course, we didn't stop our economic cooperation, but we can build on it,
okay.
Especially in the energy area.
Alon Liel, I imagine you're more or less on the same page.
I think the agreement is nicely balanced, but the question will be the implementation. For Israel, the most important part of the agreement is a possible gas deal. If this will work out and we will find ourselves in 1 or 2 years exporting gas massively to Turkey, this will be wonderful. But there are many obstacles on the way, a lot of opposition around, especially Greece, Cyprus, maybe Russia, and it's not an easy deal to work out. It's very much a governmental deal. So the test from the Israeli side is the gas deal. From the Turkish side, I think the test will be Gaza. Because shifting and transferring equipment to Gaza is a very, very sensitive security issue in Israel. If it will work smoothly and the Palestinians will not misuse it, then we have a huge achievement because it can help the people of Gaza and they need it badly, and Israel needs it also because this siege is damaging Israel's image. So the question is mostly in the implementation. We have here two issues that were agreed upon but very, very difficult to implement.
Let's speak about Gaza then, Hamas in particular, which has had a bit of a mixed reaction to these moves. They've said thank you for Turkey's offer to build infrastructure and increase aid as part of this deal, but some of its leaders in exile, including some here in Turkey, say this is a disappointment and it's a concession that Israel doesn't deserve, and it's keeping the blockade in place unfairly. What do you think of Hamas's position?
First of all, this is going to be a process where two countries is going to build the confidence among them. So it is not going to be easy. For Turkey, of course, helping Gaza, the Palestinians in Gaza, is a very important matter. And with this agreement, Turkey is going to have a position to help the people in Gaza to improve their daily life. And from Turkish point of view, it is going to be a matter of building trust with Israeli government again. But let's listen to the Ramallah, the President Abbas and Khalid Mashal all express satisfaction with the results. I'm sure there is going to be people in Turkey, in Israel, and in Palestine who will probably not like some aspects of this agreement. But generally, leadership, both governments, Ankara and Tel Aviv, and the leadership of Palestinians and leadership of Hamas endorsed this agreement.
Alon Liel, dealing with the issue of Gaza, Ari, this agreement won't be easy, as the ambassador recognizes here as well. But what do you fear most could go wrong?
The past experience has been very bad. Palestinians were channeling equipment metal, cement, for tunnels. And once Israel catches them, the first time, this will be stopped. And I think Turkey has to be very much aware of it and warn the Palestinians, because this whole deal can collapse on some Palestinians smuggling this equipment to the wrong place, and Israel can monitor it, is monitoring it, and here, if somebody will not be cautious, we will check the equipment before it goes in, but it'll be very difficult to check what happens with it once it's inside Gaza.
Okay. Ambassador, though, how much do those concerns actually worry you? Because as Alon Liel was saying, it could effectively derail this deal.
Well, all the aid, humanitarian aid and the construction materials will go to the Israeli harbor of Ashdod. So I think that's one of the safeguards for Israel, because all the material will go through Israel. We will use Ashdod to send the material to Palestine. All Turkey is interested is humanitarian aid, contributing to the infrastructure of Gaza, which were destroyed during the Israeli military operation.
We have said that this will bring stability. We've heard it said, I should say, that this will bring stability to the region. But there is an issue with how much this will actually anger Turkey's Muslim allies, who feel Turkey has turned its back on the ideology it shared with its Muslim allies in the region.
I don't think, because our region is passing through a very difficult time. The Middle East is in turmoil. There are, all the balances is shaking in the Middle East. There is a power struggle between Saudi Arabia and in Iran. As I pointed out, there is a civil war in two of our neighbors. There is Russian involvement in Syria. Under these circumstances, this deal is going to contribute to the stability of the region.
I'd like to thank both of our guests so much for joining us on the Newsmakers. Let's turn to the other significant diplomatic development this week, the move toward normalizing relations between Turkey and Russia. President Erdogan has sent a message to the Kremlin expressing his sadness over the downing of a Russian fighter jet on the Syrian border last year. Now, the incident infuriated Russia, with President Putin demanding an apology and retaliating by imposing sanctions on Turkey. 7 months later, the two leaders are finally set to talk. Sandra Gatman has more.
This was the moment the fallout began. A Russian jet shot down by Turkish forces after entering Turkey's airspace.
Whoever violates our airspace, despite the continuous warnings and the declarations of engagement rules, it is our international right to take any precautions against it.
It was the first major loss for Moscow since its air campaign started in Syria.
Today's tragic event will have significant consequences, including for the relations between Russia and Turkey.
The consequences were serious, starting with a freeze in diplomatic ties. But in a surprise move, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has written a personal letter to the Kremlin, expressing his deepest condolences to the family of the pilot who was killed. The two leaders are to hold a phone call for the first time in months. It is the first sign the two countries may be patching up, and an indication of the toll it's taken on Turkey. Since the incident, Russia has retaliated in several ways, including an embargo on food imports from Turkey, a ban on visa-free travel for Turkish citizens, and on Russian tourism to Turkey. Millions of regular Russian tourists have deserted Turkey's southern coastline. Overall summer bookings are down by half, which could hurt Turkey's economy later this year. As for Russia, its energy investments in Turkey have also been hurt, Turkey being a main gateway for Russia's supply of energy to the rest of Europe. Russian citizens have also been deprived of Turkish exports like food and textiles. Across the border in Syria, the diplomatic heat also continues over how to end the war. Russia wants Bashar al-Assad to remain, while Turkey and other Western countries want him to leave office. But while Russia and Turkey are unlikely to reset their foreign policy, normalizing relations in other areas may go a long way in reducing a surplus of tension in the region. Sandra Gottman, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Moscow to discuss the latest developments between Turkey and Russia is Dr. Pavel Felgenhauer, military analyst and contributor to the Moscow Times. And we still have here with us in the studio former Turkish ambassador to Israel, Dr. Oguz. Celikkol, thank you so much both for joining us. Let me begin in Moscow. Pavel Felgenhauer, Russian media, from largely what we've seen, has labeled this as the apology that Russia had been looking for, but the Kremlin is still saying that this will not be a process of just a few days. Do you think we're on the road then to normalization, or are there still some real obstacles ahead for the Turkey-Russia relationship?
Well, of course, there are obstacles, though actually it's not only the press, it's the Kremlin, which officially said that this is an apology and that basically it has been accepted, and that President Vladimir Putin and President Erdogan are going to have telephone talks. So Russia is very serious on trying to rebuild fences with Turkey. Though it will take much more than just resolving the issue of the Russian jet, and more than an apology. Of course, Russia wants a compensation. It's not clear will Turkey pay the compensation, but really there are more important issues, issues that preceded this incident with the bomber. It's Russia wants to cooperate with Turkey. It wants to cooperate with Turkey on Syria, at least on the level as Russia is cooperating with Israel. Turkey should change its course and most likely be more supportive of a kind of reformed Assad regime taking over Syria once again.
That's a big ask, but does this overture perhaps pave the way to some kind of cooperation on Russia and Turkey over Syria?
Yes. Of course, tomorrow's telephone call going to be very important because this is going to be the first direct contact between two presidents for a long time, for 6-7 months. They can cooperate in Syria. In the past, they cooperated. But there are other areas very important. We are going to have a very important NATO meeting at the beginning of July, on the 7th and 8th. From the Romanian side, there are calls of permanent NATO presence in the Black Sea. Both Russia and Turkey share the same views for the security of the Black Sea. Also, there are very important matters of preserving the Montreux Strait Convention. All these matters important both Russia and Turkey. And this normalization of Turkish-Russian relations is happening just before NATO summit in Warsaw. It could be a coincidence, of course, because there were signs of rapprochement between two countries for some time. When President Putin was in Greece, visiting Greece, he sent some signals, positive signals to Turkey. And then the letter came to our presidents to Russia, and now telephone call. But bilateral relations between Turkey and Russia is very important because they are trade partners. The trade volume between two countries reached more than $30 billion. Russia became second important partner for Turkey in trade matters. There are very important natural gas deals. There is new projects. Russia is building the first Turkish nuclear plant in Turkey. So all this shows how important bilateral relations, but also there are international matters Turkey and Russia could cooperate, should cooperate.
And no one has ever said that the economic relationship between Turkey and Russia is not anything short of fundamental. However, I need to get Pavel Felgenhauer's opinion on this. As we were just hearing, Turkey has just announced a change in its military rules of engagement, which allows NATO allies to carry out more patrol flights on its border with Syria. Will that potentially be seen as a provocation in Russia?
Most likely it won't be seen as very, very good, but it depends on what's going to be really happening on the ground. Russia is trying to cooperate in Syria not only with the regional powers, but also with the Americans. There has been a lot of effort to try and find, again, a quid pro quo to show the Americans that a reformed Assad regime is the best option because that will keep Syria more or less the lid over Syria. It won't transform into a free-for-all like Libya, a totally failed state. And so Russia hopes that that will be an argument that could go in Washington and, more importantly, with Ankara. And of course, there's also the Russian military are a bit apprehensive about this permanent proposed presence of NATO in the Black Sea, which cannot happen without Turkish cooperation, and Russia would be seeking Turkish assurances there. And of course, the economics are important. The Russian tourist industry is just overjoyed over the prospect that it can again send Russian tourists to cheap Turkish resorts on the south coast.
Well, let's talk about that. If the military tensions remain the same, or perhaps even increase, will it be possible to at least negotiate the economic relationship independently, seeing how much both Russia and Turkey have suffered since the downing of this jet financially because of the sanctions and the other economic implications?
Well, you know, Turkey and Russia built a very important economic partnership, even though they had differences, political differences in many issues in the past. We could do the same thing again. We don't have to see eye to eye on every issue. Look at in the past, you know, we built a very important bilateral relationship, but we didn't share the same views on many international issues, maybe even in Syria, but other issues also. But Turkey and Russia managed in the past building bilateral relations, confidence between the two countries. That can be done again. We don't have to see in every international issue eye to eye.
Okay.
There could be differences. United States is our main ally. We are, you know, allies in the NATO, but we don't see sometimes eye to eye in many international issues. That can be done in Russia in the past. It can be done again.
Do you think we can decouple the economic relationship between Russia and Turkey from what is happening military and the conflict in Syria, or no? Will those have to be intertwined as they have been since that Russian jet was downed?
Yes, I believe that is possible, but that depends, of course, on the Turkish position. Russia wants to have a more balanced base in the Middle East. I mean, we don't want to be just on the sides of the Iranians and the other Shias. Russia already has a very good working relationship with Israel, and Russia wants to, and with Egypt, and Russia very much wants to broaden that to Turkey. So right now, I would say it's not just Turkey making advances towards Russia, but Russia making advances toward Turkey to find a kind of common ground. Before the downing of the plane, Russia considered Turkey a very important partner, a strategic partner there in the region, and Moscow would want to restore that if possible.
Oguz Celikkol, final words?
Yes, Turkey wants to restore that too. That's what we are trying to do. We would like to have a friendly Russia. We would like to have a Russia that we can cooperate on many issues. We want to be a partner in Russia that we can discuss things, even Syria. We can have many things done in Syria. Fighting against terrorism is one of them in the Middle East. And of course, Russia and other Western states like United States doesn't have the same policies in Russia, but they can cooperate. We can have the same with Russia. But cooperation with Russia and Turkey could benefit the Syrian people, because in Syria now we are living one of the worst humanitarian crises the world is facing since the Second World War. And Turkey and Russia cooperation will help the Syrian people alleviate their sufferings and find the solution, of course.
Okay, Ambassador Celikkol, I will have to let you have the last word because we are out of time. Thank you both so much for joining us on the Newsmakers. And that's all for this edition. Our newsmaker today was Turkey, as we asked what's behind its rapprochement with Israel and Russia. Turkey and Israel have signed a reconciliation deal normalizing their relations 6 years after Israeli troops killed 10 Turkish activists on an aid ship heading to Gaza. And President Erdogan has expressed great sadness over shooting down a Russian jet on the Syrian border last year. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Andrea Sankey. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.